Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a damp, muddy village where smoke curls lazily from thatched chimneys, and the smell of turnip stew competes with livestock. The year? Let's call it 1327. You live on the edge of town, just far enough to be convenient for your herbal work, and far enough to make people suspicious. Your neighbors call you wise, not always with a smile. It starts with something simple. A tea you give to a woman with a fever. She gets better too fast. Her husband mutters something about unholy speed. A cow gives birth to a calf with 2 heads. You weren't even near the barn, but somehow your name floats through the air like wood smoke, drifting into ears looking for someone, anyone to blame. You wake one morning to find someone's laid twigs on your doorstep in a pattern. It's probably a prank, but it makes your spine tingle. The same day, the miller's daughter has a seizure. No one's seen epilepsy before, so naturally it's your fault. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this sleepy little tavern stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You try to keep your head down, but the whispers keep rising. She talks to cats. She walks in the woods, alone. You get caught smiling while a baby stops crying. You see a crow land on your fence, and it stays just a moment too long. Suddenly, the village is remembering things it never cared about before. They start looking at you sideways in church. Not that you've done anything, but in medieval Europe, innocence is more about perception than proof. You've kept bees since your grandmother taught you, but now that's commanding animals. You know which mushrooms not to eat. Suspiciously useful. And yes, you own a book. It's mostly recipes and notes from your mother, but no one else in the village can read, so it must be a grimoire. Historians still argue whether most accusations came from mass panic or personal vendettas. Either way, one moment you're mixing chamomile, and the next, you're the town's lightning rod for anxiety. It doesn't help that you've aged gracefully. No warts, no hunchback, just strange, lovely silence. Beauty? Suspicious? Solitude? Unnatural? Intelligence? Dangerous. You don't fit, and that's the point. In medieval times, community was everything. Stand out, and you're inviting the hammer. The line between healer and heretic is threadbare here. You'd think helping the sick would earn gratitude, but no. Miracles are divine, not homemade. If you fix something too well, folks start whispering that you must have broken it first. That's the twisted logic of fear. Meanwhile, your cat, named Mopsy, because why not, is just being a cat. She rubs her face on your herbs and curls in your lap. Unfortunately, she's black. That's not good for either of you. You remember when people used to come to you for help. The farmer's wife with her cough, the boy with a burn from the forge. Now they avert their eyes like you're a walking plague. Speaking of which, the actual plague is circling nearby, and when that arrives, you'd better believe they'll look for someone to blame. That night, you hear them in the tavern. One man is talking louder than he should. Too much ale, too little mercy. She cured my wife's fever in a single day. 1 day. He slams his mug. Another chimes in. Aye, and the priest's sheep miscarried after she passed by the field. The logic is rock solid, obviously. You can feel it coming like thunder under your feet. You've lived through long winters, poor harvests and fleas. But this is different. This is personal. The tension wraps around you like wet wool, clinging no matter how hard you shake it off. The next morning, there's a knock at your door. You open the door slowly. It's Thomas, the baker's second son. He's 17, wears a perpetual frown and smells faintly of soot and yeast. He doesn't meet your eyes. They want you at the square, he mutters. Now. He shifts from foot to foot like he's debating whether to say more, but ultimately turns and walks away without another word. The door creaks closed behind you, though you don't quite remember pushing it shut. You wrap your shawl tighter, not just for the cold, You can already hear the murmurs. Down the path, people stand on stoops, pretending to sweep, pretending not to stare. A child points. His mother pulls his arm back, not gently. You know this walk. It's short, but your feet feel heavy, like you're stepping through wet sand instead of dirt. By the time you reach the square, the crowd has formed its usual half moon. You in the middle, the rest circling like curious vultures. At the center stands the bailiff, puffed up and red-faced, flanked by two assistants whose job seems to be looking important and holding clubs they won't use unless someone blinks too slow. The bailiff coughs for effect. "Alice of the Hedge," he announces, using the name they always say with just enough scorn to curl it. "You are summoned to account for suspicious activity and consort with unnatural forces." You blink. That's it? No one steps forward with proof, of course. They don't need to. Margaret the candlemaker nods solemnly, as if she personally witnessed you hexing the moon. Old John mutters something about dead chickens, though he forgets they died in winter, 6 months ago. The bailiff continues. "You are accused by several good townsfolk of summoning storms, disturbing births, and possessing a book of unknown language." He narrows his eyes. "And your cat speaks." Well, not speaks, but Mopsy is chatty. The crowd hums with agreement. Not loud, not aggressive, just the quiet, nauseating hum of people eager for something to believe. Historians still argue whether these scenes were orchestrated by power-hungry elites or grew from genuine fear. In this case, it feels like both. There's fear in the crowd, yes, but also excitement. Something is finally happening in this boring village. The bailiff announces that a traveling inquisitor has been called for. "He shall determine the truth," he says, as if truth is a matter of opinion and theatrical flourish. The crowd disperses slowly, some nodding at you like they're sorry, others like they're already mourning or celebrating your departure. Back home, Mopsy meows pointedly. She doesn't understand what's happening, only that you smell nervous. You sit by the fire, though you don't light it. The air feels thick. It's the same feeling animals have before a storm, when the sky turns yellow and everything gets too quiet. You don't sleep that night. In the morning, the village has changed. It's subtle, like someone shifted everything 2 inches to the left. People won't look at you. Even your friend Agnes, the one who once cried on your shoulder over a stillbirth, turns away. You try to remember if you ever asked her for a favor. Maybe that's what did it. No one likes to owe a witch. You still have 2 more days until the Inquisitor arrives. Until then, you are permitted to remain at home but forbidden from leaving town. You are also encouraged, politely, to avoid contact with others. So, you tend to your garden. You cut the last of the lavender and hang it upside down. You whisper to the mint plant. You sharpen your shears, not for defense, but because that's what your hands remember doing. A boy throws a stone at your door. He misses. It bounces off the wall and startles a goose. You tell yourself to laugh. You don't. The next day, you're given a visit. Not from a guard or an official, but from Widow Hensley. She doesn't knock. She slips in the back door like mist. She holds your hand for a moment and leaves a single crust of bread on your counter. Then she vanishes. You wonder who will be next. Who will remember they once needed your help? Who will pretend they never knew you? You think about the woman who asked for a tonic to help her husband sleep, the blacksmith who needed salve for a burn, the priest who once confided that he couldn't stop dreaming about fire. You are part of all of them, but none of them will stand beside you. And somewhere beyond the trees, down a road curling like a snake's tongue, the Inquisitor is coming. The morning he arrives, it's like the village holds its breath. Clouds crowd low in the sky, puffed and restless, as if they too feel the change in atmosphere. No one speaks above a whisper. Even the chickens cluck suspiciously quieter. You hear the hooves before you see him, then the creak of old leather, the jangle of iron buckles, and the muted shuffle of a man who walks like the road apologizes to him. The Inquisitor is not what you expected. No dramatic cloak, no halo of fire, just a thin man in dark wool robes with small dry hands and a voice like parchment being folded. He introduces himself as Brother Willem, though the children later call him the Ash Man because of how gray he looks. He speaks softly, which somehow makes him more terrifying. The bailiff puffs beside him like a toad showing off a borrowed jewel. "This is the woman," he says, gesturing at you like you're a piece of meat someone's left on a questionable plate. Brother Willem nods once. Then he begins his questions. "Do you own a book?" You nod. "Yes." He pauses, as if waiting for you to add, "And it screams at night." You don't. "What language is it in?" "Latin," you reply. "My mother taught me to read it." There's a rustle in the crowd behind you. Latin is fine, if you're a priest. If you're a woman with a garden and a black cat, Latin is dangerous. "Do you speak to animals?" he asks next. "I talk at them," you say, not unkindly, but they rarely answer. He doesn't smile, not even a twitch. He makes a mark in his little leather notebook. It's terribly neat. Next, he asks about your herbs, your salves, your knowledge of the moon's cycle. He asks if you've ever bled someone to relieve fever. You have. If you've used leeches, of course. And if you've burned sage in a ritual. Define ritual. You answer everything plainly, but each answer feels like a stone sliding into a sack you're being forced to carry. Then he asks the villagers to come forward, one at a time. This is the part where things fall apart. Margaret the candlemaker says you cursed her bees. You remember her bees dying because she placed the hive in full sun. Thomas claims you ruined his bread. You know for a fact he forgot the yeast. Each person tells their story, and it all sounds worse than it was. Not because they lie, but because they edit. They leave out their part. They leave out the time they were grateful. They leave out that it was never strange until they decided it was. One woman says she saw you walking in the woods during a full moon. "With your arms out," she adds dramatically, like that seals it. You did. You were stretching. Historians still argue whether these inquisitions were methodical purges or social panic with paperwork. Willem seems methodical, but the people are clearly panicked. He scribbles, he nods, he watches. His eyes never blink enough. And then he says, "We will examine her home." Of course you knew this was coming. You walk beside him down the dusty path, aware of every footstep behind you. They're not chasing you yet, but they're not letting you go either. Your home is small. 2 rooms, a crooked beam across the ceiling, and a dozen drying herbs that now look far more suspicious than useful. He examines the fireplace, the shelves, your one book, which he flips through and frowns at, not because it's sinister, but because it's mostly garden notes and old soup stains. Then, of course, the real prize, your cat. Mopsy, obligingly, sits on the windowsill and yawns like she's bored of this plot line. Brother Willem stares. "She is always near you?" You nod. "She's old." "Does she accompany you in your rituals?" "If you mean when I gather mint, yes. She likes mint." He doesn't write that part down. Then comes the test, not of logic or truth, but of spectacle. They search for marks, devil's marks, on your skin. This is not polite. It's invasive, humiliating, and absurd. Every mole, scar, or freckle is noted. That scratch you got from pruning your roses? Suspect. The birthmark on your ankle? Possibly demonic. You think about biting someone just for fun. You don't. They don't find much. But that doesn't matter. Because one woman swears she saw you feed Mopsy with your blood once. She bit her finger, the woman says, breathless. And the cat licked it. You remember that. You were chopping leeks. Still, the Inquisitor nods. He tells you not to leave your home. He will make his decision by morning. Outside, it has started to drizzle. Back inside, Mopsy curls on your lap and purrs without irony. You stroke her fur and try not to wonder what tomorrow brings. The rain falls all night. Not a thunderstorm, not a gentle mist. Just that persistent, sideways drizzle that finds every crack in the roof and drips exactly where you sit. It taps against your shutters like it's counting down the hours. You lie awake on your straw-stuffed mattress, the blanket pulled high and useless. Mopsy shifts in her sleep beside you, paws twitching as if she's chasing mice in a happier dream. You, however, chase nothing, because you know what dawn brings. A verdict you probably won't like, rendered by a man who thinks freckles are evil and mint is a gateway herb. The rooster crows too early. Or maybe time is playing tricks. You rise and dress slowly. Your hands feel like they belong to someone else. When you look in the mirror, what little shine your old pot lid gives, you barely recognize yourself. The woman staring back has tired eyes, tight lips, and the unmistakable look of someone about to be judged for the crime of existing slightly off-center. By the time you arrive at the square again, the entire village is already there. Rain has turned the dirt to sludge, and the smell of wet wool, sweat, and nervousness is thick in the air. Someone tries to start a hymn, but it dies halfway through the first verse. Brother Willem stands atop the stone platform used for grain announcements and rare public floggings. He clears his throat, dramatically. He must practice this. I have considered the testimonies. I have examined the evidence, he says, which is generous since most of that evidence includes hearsay and a particularly charismatic goose. He pauses long enough for everyone to lean in. Alice of the Hedge, he intones, you are hereby declared suspect in the practice of witchcraft. There's a beat of silence, then a murmur. Not guilty. Not yet. Not innocent either. Just suspect, which, in this century, is like saying you're potentially flammable in a town full of torches. Your punishment for now is observation. You are to remain under scrutiny for 3 days. During that time, your behavior will be noted, your interactions documented, and, if warranted, you will be subjected to trial by ordeal. Ah, yes. The medieval equivalent of saying, let's see if she drowns before we call her innocent. Historians still debate whether inquisitors like Willem believed in what they were doing, or simply followed protocol to keep chaos at bay. In your case, it feels like he's enjoying the attention. He closes his notebook like a stage curtain. The crowd disperses with that same murmur of agreement, confusion, and quiet bloodlust. You're escorted home by a guard, not a friendly one. He stands outside your door, chewing a sprig of parsley like it offends him. You consider offering him soup. You don't. Inside, your house suddenly feels smaller, like the walls know your future is shrinking. You try to pass the time. You grind herbs with hands that shake. You feed Mopsy bits of bread, careful not to let anyone see. You start reading your book again, but the words blur. You've read the same page 6 times and still can't remember what it said about lavender. On the second day, the bailiff himself knocks at your door. His boots are clean. Suspiciously so. He carries a basin of water. They say you should be tested, he mutters. Trial by water. Tomorrow. Ah, so soon. You nod, and he looks relieved. Maybe he expected you to scream. You don't. What would be the point? That night, you sleep in bursts. You dream of floating, not in water, but above the village, looking down at yourself, shrinking, becoming just another odd tale whispered by a fire. The next morning, you're taken to the edge of the river. It's not much of a river, more of a swollen stream with rocks and reeds and frogs that seem too amused. The village gathers once more. These people must love an excuse to cancel chores. They tie your arms. Not tightly, but enough. Your dress clings in the morning mist. A man you don't recognize steps forward. He holds a Bible and a stick. If she floats, he says, she is guilty. If she sinks, she is pure. You raise an eyebrow. And if I drown while proving my innocence? He blinks. Then God will know your heart. Fantastic. Historians still argue how often this ritual was actually used versus how often it was threatened. You're not sure which is worse, the practice or the precedent. They wade you in. The cold is instant, wrapping around your legs like judgment. You're told to lie back. You do. The water rushes into your ears, silencing the world. You float. Because of course you do. People float. That's how physics works, even in a century that doesn't know what physics is yet. Someone gasps, someone cheers, someone spits. They pull you out roughly. You're shivering, soaking, furious in a quiet, brittle way. Brother Willem says nothing, but he writes, and the crowd, for all their anticipation, suddenly looks a bit unsure. You're guilty now, just for being dry. They let you walk home on your own, which feels like a trap. Your dress clings to your legs, each step cold and squelchy. Mud sucks at your shoes as if the earth itself wants to keep you still. Behind you, the village fades into background noise, soft talking, a cow's distant lowing, the creak of cartwheels. But it all sounds muffled, like you're underwater again. Mopsy meets you at the door with a look of disapproval only a cat can deliver. She sniffs you once, flicks her tail, and pads back to the hearth like nothing's wrong. But everything is wrong. You strip off your wet clothes and hang them near the fire, though the flames are weak. You use the last of your kindling. There's a chill inside you that fire won't fix. That evening, the knock comes. Of course it does. This time it's 2 guards. One thin, one wide, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. They don't say much, just gesture. You follow. You're led to the small stone building near the chapel, the one with the heavy oak door. It smells of damp hay and regret. Inside, a single wooden bench, some rope, and several unpleasant-looking iron objects hanging from pegs like meat hooks. This is not a chapel. Brother Willem enters a few moments later, rubbing his hands as if he's preparing for something formal, like signing a contract. Instead, he simply says, "We'll begin with questioning. If the truth does not come freely, we will help it arrive." You sit on the bench, which is much less comfortable than it looks. Splinters mostly. They start with words. When did you first consort with spirits? You tell them you don't. What rituals do you perform under the moon? You tell them you harvest sage. For cooking. What bargains have you made with dark forces? You ask, genuinely. Do cats count? Willem doesn't laugh. The thin guard does. He's elbowed. Then come the objects. They start small. Thumb screws. You've heard of them but never seen them. They are not metaphorical. The wide guard demonstrates on a turnip, which feels unnecessary. You refuse to confess. Next is the pear, a terrible little device shaped like the fruit it's named for, though its purpose is far less nutritious. It's shown to you, not used, yet. You ask if this is really the path to truth. Willem murmurs something about purification. Historians still argue whether torture during witch trials was widespread or exaggerated by later accounts. Either way, it was real enough for the people it touched. You still refuse to confess. Willem grows irritated. He accuses you of stubbornness, of spiritual corruption, of womanly pride, whatever that's supposed to mean. The thin guard unties your hands just enough to shift them behind your back. The rope burns. You do not cry. Instead, you talk. You talk about herbs, about your mother, about how you've delivered babies and mended broken legs and helped old men sleep without screaming. You talk because talking is power, and silence is surrender, and because you are tired of being quiet for the comfort of cowards. Eventually, they stop. Maybe it's the words. Maybe it's that Willem realizes nothing he does will make you say what he wants. He leaves the room. You're left tied to the bench, shivering slightly, though not from cold this time. The guards don't speak. The room smells like old sweat and damp stone. There's a drip somewhere, steady, persistent, like time itself. After what feels like an hour, the wide guard cuts your bindings, gently. His eyes don't meet yours. You walk home again, slower this time. Your joints ache, your shoulders scream, but your back is straight. That night, you sleep. Not because you feel safe, but because your body has simply stopped negotiating. In the morning, you find a basket at your door. Inside, a crust of bread, some dried apples, a small bundle of lavender. No note. You don't need one. Somebody remembers. Somebody is still quietly on your side, even if they can't say so aloud. You put the lavender in a dish by your bed. Mopsy sits beside it and purrs like the world is fine. You, however, prepare for the next step. Because you know the script now. You refused to confess, which means they will escalate. And the worst part? It won't matter if they believe you're a witch. They just have to convince everyone else. The next morning is quiet, too quiet, even for a town already tiptoeing around your existence. No birdsong, no hooves clattering past, just wind brushing through the hedges and the faint clink of someone's spoon against a wooden bowl across the lane. You know it means something. And then there's the knock. You almost laugh because of course there is. But it isn't the bailiff or Brother Willem, or even one of the guards with their habitual parsley. It's a boy, barely 12. He wears no shoes, has a nose running freely, and holds a rolled bit of parchment like it might explode. "Message," he says, eyes wide with either admiration or terror. You can't tell which. The note is brief. One line: "Inspection of the home continues this noon. Be ready." Inspection. Again. But this time it's not about cats or candles. It's about marks. You spend the morning cleaning your little home, not because you think it will help, but because it gives your hands something to do. You sweep the hearth, reorder your jars, even dust the top shelf no one ever looks at. Then, at exactly midday, the knock returns, this time in triplicate. That's never good. They come in without waiting. Willem, the bailiff, and a local priest who hasn't spoken to you since you were 9 and fell asleep in his pew. Willem speaks first. "We've heard talk of bodily signs, unnatural blemishes. We'll be verifying." You resist the urge to sigh. "You mean freckles again?" He doesn't answer. Instead, he gestures toward the priest, who produces a long, thin needle, more pin than blade. "To test if your marks feel pain," he says. "Ah yes, the devil's mark test. If there's a place on your body that doesn't bleed or hurt when pricked, it's obviously proof you've suckled a demon. Science at its medieval finest. You stand there, arms crossed over your chest. As they begin, the priest pricks your back, your shoulder, behind your knee. You wince each time, not because it truly hurts, but because it's humiliating to be treated like meat in a market stall. Then they find a mole, just above your left hip. It's been there your whole life. Round, flat, utterly boring. They prick it. You flinch. "It reacted," Willem mutters, annoyed, as if disappointed your devil pact isn't more obvious. The bailiff steps forward and starts checking your arms. "There's a scar here," he says. "Yes," you reply, "from when I fell out of a cherry tree at age 7. The priest gives you a look like climbing trees is in itself witchcraft. Historians still argue whether these inspections were sincere attempts at justice or theatrical ways to justify foregone conclusions. This one feels like both. They're not finding what they want, but they'll twist it until they do. After nearly 20 minutes of awkward poking and murmuring Latin prayers, they find nothing unusual. Or rather, nothing they can confidently label supernatural. But Willem's not done. He asks for your tools, your mortar and pestle, your book, your dried herbs. He sniffs the time, rubs the edge of the mortar between his fingers like he's waiting for it to whisper. Then he picks up a jar labeled foxglove, raises an eyebrow and asks, "Do you know what this does?" "Yes," you reply. "In small doses it calms the heart. In large ones it stops it." The silence is immediate. Willem smiles. The priest crosses himself. "I use it for chest pain," you add. "Very carefully. I've never harmed anyone." But the phrase is already out there. It stops the heart. It's so much more interesting than eases palpitations. You know this is how stories start. How facts become knives. Willem wraps the jar in a cloth and pockets it. "We'll need to examine this further. You want to ask by whom, but it won't matter. They've decided it's dangerous, simply because you understand it." Before leaving, Willem turns and says, "You'll be summoned again. Soon. No date, no details. Just the vague promise of further misery. After they're gone, you sit by the fire with Mopsy. She rubs against your leg as if nothing's happened. You envy her ignorance. You remember what your mother told you once, back when you were very small. Knowledge is a sharp thing. Carry it carefully, or they'll take it from you. Back then, you thought she meant gossip. Now you realize she meant this. You pick up your book and trace the inked letters of a long-forgotten recipe. The handwriting is shaky, your grandmother's. Beneath it, a pressed flower crumbles into dust. Outside, thunder rolls again. Just once, like a warning. They summon you again at dusk. This time there's no speech, no ritual nodding, just a knock and a curt order. Bring only what you're wearing. Mopsy tries to follow, but you nudge her gently back inside. Guard the house, you whisper, which is probably the silliest command you've ever given a cat. But right now, you need the illusion of normalcy. The guards escort you down a back path, not the one through the square. That tells you something. Either they're ashamed, or they want fewer eyes watching what comes next. You arrive at a low building you've never noticed before. It's sunken slightly into the ground with heavy stones framing the door. Inside, it's candlelit and smells faintly of wax, smoke, and vinegar? This isn't a court. This is a test chamber. At the center stands a wooden table. On it, a loaf of bread, a jug of water, and a feather. Yes, a feather. You don't ask. Willem stands in the shadows. You will confess, he says flatly, or we'll continue our inquiries with the townspeople. You raise an eyebrow. More needles? Another river dip? He doesn't smile. Number. This time, we test the bread. Ah, yes. The Eucharistic test. You're handed a piece of holy bread, blessed by the priest, infused with divine presence. The idea is, if you swallow it and live, perhaps you're innocent. But if you choke, faint, or otherwise look even mildly uncomfortable, well, clearly the body of Christ is rejecting you. Medieval logic is, let's say, selectively applied. You hold the bread. It's dry, unleavened, crumbles a bit as you lift it to your mouth. You chew slowly like you're trying not to insult it. You swallow. Your heart races, of course, but that's just nerves, not demonic possession. You do not faint. You do not burst into flames. You do, however, sneeze. Once, from the feather on the table. Willem's eyes narrow. What was that? You point at the feather. I'm allergic to swans. He scribbles in his book again. You wonder how many pages he's filled now with your yawns, sneezes, and questionable moles. A compendium of mundane humanity presented as witchery. Next comes the jug of water. Blessed, says the priest. You're told to drink it slowly. You do. It tastes like regular water except maybe slightly metallic. Probably the cup. Again, no convulsions, no demonic screaming. Just you, tired and increasingly annoyed. Still, they seem disappointed. Willem flips through his notes. Perhaps a night in contemplation, he says, which you correctly translate as locked in a very small room with no bedding. The room you're placed in is stone, damp, and not quite empty. A single wooden stool sits in the center. You think of all the women who must have sat on it before you. How many are still alive? How many confessed just to make the air stop pressing in? Historians still debate whether these spiritual tests were ever truly believed, or simply performance meant to coerce. Here in this cell, it feels like theater no one is enjoying. You sit in the corner instead of on the stool. The candle they've left you burns low, flickering like it's considering going out just to be dramatic. You whisper a song your grandmother used to hum, a lullaby in a dialect that's now out of favor. You don't sing it for comfort. You sing it to remember that once life was made of more than suspicion and dust. At some point, you sleep, briefly. You wake to the sound of keys. A guard opens the door, tosses in a scrap of bread and mutters, "Eat." You do. Not because you're hungry, but because you know they're watching. Always watching. You're taken back to the main hall. Willem's there as usual, flipping through pages as if one might suddenly solve everything. You've passed the tests, he says finally, in a tone that suggests he's deeply annoyed by this outcome. But suspicion remains. Of course it does. You don't reply. You're too tired for sarcasm, too bruised for rage. He sighs. We'll hold a formal tribunal. 3 days' time. The guards escort you out. This time, through the square, everyone sees you. Some look away, some stare. One woman spits at your feet, another crosses herself. But Agnes, the midwife who once held your hand while her sister bled, meets your gaze. Just for a second. It's not a smile, but it isn't fear either. Back home, Mopsy is asleep in your herb basket. The lavender has scattered everywhere. It smells like memory. You sit down, close your eyes, and prepare. Because the worst part isn't the accusations. It's knowing the end of this story might not belong to you. 3 days. That's how long you're given before the tribunal. Long enough for the village to stew. Long enough for whispers to ferment into certainty. Long enough for fear to harden like frost on morning grass. You spend most of the time at home. Not that you have much choice. You're still observed, which is a polite way of saying watched like a fox in a henhouse. The guard assigned to you now is younger, maybe 15, and tries to hide behind hedges as if invisibility comes with youth. You give him tea on the second day. He accepts it with the reluctance of someone who's been told your spoons are cursed. Back inside, you prepare, not for defense, but for clarity. You write a list. Every herbal remedy you've ever administered, every person you've helped, every storm that occurred while you were absolutely indoors. It won't help, not really, but it makes you feel like your side of the story exists somewhere other than your ribs. On the third morning, the town wakes early. The square has been swept. A large bench is placed at the front, 3 chairs behind it, a table off to the side for Willem and his increasingly judgmental notebook. The tribunal is ceremonial. That means it's already decided, but must be performed to look fair. You're called before the assembly just after midday. The sun is high but refuses to give warmth. You stand on a platform made from old planks, the same one they used last spring for a maypole dance. Funny, how quickly celebration becomes execution staging. The 3 officials are locals, landholders, clergy, and the reeve, who once paid you in eggs for curing his gout. They sit stiffly, expressions unreadable, though one looks deeply uncomfortable, like his shoes are too tight, or his conscience is flaring up. The bailiff begins. He summarizes your crimes: suspicious herb use, proximity to illness, possession of a cat, and unwomanly independence. You almost laugh at that last one. Then come the witnesses. Margaret steps forward again. She's wearing her finest apron and a face like sour milk. She looked at me strange the day my butter wouldn't churn, she says. Next thing I know, the cream's gone bad. You want to suggest she clean her churn better. Next, Thomas. She gave my brother a tea that made him sleep for 12 hours. Who knows what kind of sorcery that was? You know exactly what kind. Valerian and honey. A remedy older than half the saints in the chapel. A few others speak. Vague complaints. Nightmares. A child's cough that lasted too long. A tooth that fell out. One man claims he dreamed of a snake after seeing you by the well. This is apparently solid evidence. Historians still argue whether trials like these were truly believed or simply used to control inconvenient women. Standing here, watching your life be boiled down to anecdotes and poorly timed colds, you suspect both are true. You're finally asked to speak. Your voice is calm. You talk about the people you've healed, the babies you've delivered, the old men you've comforted in their last hours. You mention the herbs you use and why. You explain foxglove again, though you leave out the part about stopping hearts. That nuance doesn't land well here. You don't beg. You don't weep. If they're going to hang you for being composed, so be it. Afterward, the tribunal withdraws for deliberation, which is theatrical, since you're fairly sure the verdict was written 3 days ago. You wait in a side room. It smells like dust and dry onion skins. Mopsy would hate it here. When they return, their faces are unreadable. Willem reads the verdict. You are not to be executed. You breathe, but only halfway. Instead, you are to be banished. From the village, from your home, from your herbs, your garden, your memories. You are to leave by dawn with no more than what you can carry. It's not death. But it is erasure. You nod, not because you accept it, but because nodding is the only thing you're allowed to do right now. The tribunal disperses like smoke. The crowd breaks apart. Some look relieved, some disappointed. You think someone even looks bored. Back home, you begin to pack. A shawl, a knife, a bundle of herbs tied with twine, your book, a pouch of coins, 6, total. Mopsy watches, sensing the change. You don't have a basket, so she'll have to walk beside you, or ride your shoulder as she sometimes does when she's feeling dramatic. You look around once more. The hearth, the dried bundles, the tiny window that catches morning light, just right. You think about all the lives you touched from this spot, and how none of it matters now. Outside, the village quiets again. Not in mourning, but in relief. Because the witch won't burn. She'll just be gone. You wake before the sun. Not because you set an alarm, those don't exist yet, but because your body, tired as it is, understands ritual. It knows this is the last time you'll see your ceiling. The warped beam above your bed. The familiar pattern of straw and stone. It knows this is goodbye. Mopsy is already awake, perched on the windowsill like a gargoyle with opinions. She stretches luxuriously, then hops down and weaves between your legs. You light a tiny fire. One last time. Not for heat, but to warm a piece of bread you saved from yesterday's offering. It's stale and dry, but smells like home. You share a bit with Mopsy, who nibbles as though savoring it. You've packed light. Your shawl, your book, a pouch of dried sage, 3 vials of tincture, and your coin pouch. Everything else must stay. They've warned you. Take too much, and it'll be considered theft. As if they haven't already stolen enough. You step outside into the gray pre-dawn. The air is damp but still, the kind of quiet that usually comes before snowfall, or in your case, banishment. No one comes to see you off, except the boy who brought the note 3 days ago. He stands a few feet away, scuffing dirt with his toe. When you meet his eyes, he looks embarrassed, but determined. He steps forward and thrusts something into your hand. It's a ribbon, faded blue, frayed at the ends. Mum said you helped me breathe better. When I was little. He shrugs. She said to give you something. You nod, unable to speak for a second. Good luck, he mumbles, then disappears behind the baker's cart like a rabbit into a hedge. You wrap the ribbon around your wrist. It smells faintly of thyme. The village is still asleep, or pretending to be. Curtains remain closed, doors bolted, except for one. Agnes. She stands on her doorstep, arms folded, expression unreadable. You pause. She doesn't wave, but she doesn't turn away either. It's enough. You start walking. Mopsy trots alongside, tail held high like a victory flag. You don't look back. Not because you're brave, but because you're afraid you might cry, and you won't give them that satisfaction. The road stretches ahead, rutted and muddy. You have no plan, no destination, just the vague idea that there are other places, places where women aren't burned for knowing how to mend a fever. You walk all morning. At some point the trees grow taller, the birds return, the air smells of pine and wet leaves. Mopsy chases a beetle. You let her. By midday, you reach a fork in the road. No signpost, just 2 directions and a breeze. You sit beneath a tree to rest. Pull out your book. Flip to the first page. It's your mother's handwriting. If you're reading this and the world has gone mad, remember, healing is never a sin. You smile. Just a little. Historians still debate how many women were truly witches and how many were simply inconvenient. You don't care about the number anymore. You care that you're not the only one. That somewhere, others have walked this path. That maybe, just maybe, there's a village that needs a healer, a midwife, a woman with a cat and a book, and nothing left to fear. You keep walking. By dusk, you find an abandoned shepherd's shelter near a stream. It's small, damp, and smells of old wool. But it's yours, for tonight at least. You gather moss and kindling, start a small fire. Mopsy curls beside you, purring like nothing's changed. Maybe she's right. You drink the last of your tincture tea, close your eyes, and let sleep find you in a world that hasn't yet decided who you'll be tomorrow. For now, you are simply not a witch. You're a woman who survived. Morning comes slowly in the woods. No rooster here, no chiming bells, no sharp knock at your door. Just the quiet sigh of wind through leaves and the bubbling of a stream that has no interest in whether or not you're a witch. You stretch beneath the wool blanket you found tucked in a corner of the shelter. It smells of sheep and mildew, but it's warm. Mopsy has decided the middle of your chest is the ideal spot for sleeping. She yawns, rearranges herself, and immediately dozes off again. You lie still for a while. Not because you're lazy, but because it's the first time in weeks no one is watching. No eyes through shutters, no footsteps circling your door, no one waiting for you to say the wrong thing or cough in a suspicious way. It's strange. The silence isn't empty. It's full. Eventually you rise. You wash your face in the stream, cold, clear water that bites at your skin in the best possible way. You chew a strip of dried apple, stretch your sore legs, and take stock of your supplies. You'll need more food soon. More coins too, though you're not quite ready to beg or barter yet. You think about heading north. There's a larger town that way, if you remember the old trade paths right. It's said they've had less interest in witch trials lately. Too many real problems, a traveler once told you. They've no time to invent them. You decide to try. The road is quieter here, less trampled, more wild. You spot tracks, deer, rabbit, a boar maybe. Nothing human. Good. By midday you pass a pair of men repairing a fence. They nod. Not overly friendly, not suspicious either, just nods. Like you're a person. No one asks your name. No one stares at your cat. You nearly cry from the ordinariness of it. You keep moving. As you walk, you gather. A handful of nettles, wild garlic, yarrow. You're not just surviving. You're building a future. Even if it's small. Even if it's hidden. That night, you find another abandoned shelter. This one better kept. A little stone circle for fires. Even a dry patch under the overhang, where you lay your shawl and your bundle. You boil some herbs in your tin cup and sip slowly, letting the warmth unclench your jaw. Mopsy chases a beetle again. Either she's adjusting well, or she never cared in the first place. You think about your old home. Not with sadness, well, maybe a little, but mostly with distance. Like a dream you can't quite remember the details of. You picture your herb bundles, your crooked window, the spot where the light used to land at noon. Then you remember the tribunal bench, the needle, the bread test. You shudder and pull your shawl tighter. Historians still argue whether banishment was seen as mercy or punishment. In your case, it feels like both. You're free, yes. But everything you knew, your roots, your rhythm, is gone. And yet, there's a thrill in not knowing what's next. The world ahead is dangerous, yes, but it's also yours now. You're no longer caged by the fear of suspicion. You've already been accused, already judged. What's left is something strangely liberating, survival without apology. That night, you dream. You're in a great forest, thick with vines and lanterns strung between trees. Other women are there, laughing, singing, dressed in shawls and boots and beads made of bones. You don't recognize them, but you know them. One offers you a bowl of something steaming. For strength, she says. You sip. It tastes like lavender and honey, and the kind of peace you thought was extinct. You wake with the dream still warm on your tongue. Mopsy is watching you, as if she dreamed it too. You smile. For real this time. Then you rise, sling your bag over your shoulder, and step into the morning. Not a witch. Not a victim. Just a woman with a name and a purpose. And maybe, just maybe, a future. The town comes into view just after sunset on the fourth day of walking. It's not much. Half a dozen stone buildings around a cracked fountain, a crooked chapel, and smoke rising lazily from chimneys. But compared to the silence of the woods, it feels loud, alive. You pause at the edge of the trees, adjusting your shawl, brushing a smudge of ash from your cheek. Mopsy circles your boots once, then trots ahead like she owns the place. You follow. No one stops you at the edge of town. No suspicious glances, no inquisitors peeking from behind tavern shutters. Just the usual evening bustle, people heading home from the fields, a few children chasing each other with sticks, someone hammering at a wheel that clearly doesn't want to be fixed today. You spot a small inn. Its sign swings gently in the breeze. The Goat and Thistle. You wonder who came up with that name and whether it was meant to be poetic or just mildly threatening. Inside, it's warm, lit by low lanterns and a hearth that's seen better logs. A few locals sit around wooden tables, murmuring over bowls of stew. No one looks up when you enter. Perfect. The innkeeper appears. A stout woman with sleeves rolled up to her elbows and a face that's clearly endured 100 winters and still not impressed. She eyes you up and down. Food or bed? She asks. Not rude, not welcoming, just direct. You glance down at Mopsy. Both, you say, if there's room for two. She snorts. That thing better not scratch the bedding. No promises. You trade one of your coins, silver, real, slightly tarnished, for bread, stew, and a straw mattress in a loft room that smells faintly of pickled onions. Mopsy sniffs the corners and immediately claims the foot of the bed. You eat slowly, savoring every bite. It's nothing special. Potato, onion, maybe a chunk of lamb if you're lucky. But after nights of cold tea and silence, it's a feast. No one asks your name. No one asks where you're from. It's almost disappointing. The next morning, you offer to sweep the hearth in exchange for a second bowl. The innkeeper grunts and hands you a broom. You suspect this is how things work here. Quiet trade, no questions. You stay a second night, then a third. You begin to learn the rhythms of the place. The baker rises before dawn and sings to her yeast. The blacksmith is missing 2 fingers and still faster than most. A little girl with a lopsided braid likes to leave flowers by the chapel steps. Not for the saints, she says, but for her grandmother, who hates saints and loved flowers. You don't tell anyone what you are, or what you were, but old habits sneak through. You notice a man coughing into his sleeve. You pass him some dried horehound with instructions. 2 days later, he's better. You see a woman rubbing her temples, eyes pinched tight. You leave a sprig of rosemary and a scrap of wool soaked in mint oil on her windowsill. No one thanks you. But no one turns you in either. Historians still debate whether post-trial witches reintegrated into society or disappeared completely. You plan to do neither. Instead, you'll carve out something new, between the cracks of suspicion and the spaces where truth hides. By the end of the week, the innkeeper asks your name. Alice, you say, and wait. No reaction. She just nods. You can stay on, she says, if you want. Laundry's piling up. It's the kindest offer you've had in months. You nod. I'll start with the linens. Mopsy meows in agreement. You begin to make a life. Not glamorous, not loud, but steady. People begin to notice, slowly, quietly. A child with a rash brought by her mother just to see. An older man with a swollen knee who insists it's nothing but sits when you offer a poultice anyway. You don't charge. Not yet. That would make it official. And for now, unofficial is safest. You sit by the hearth each night, writing in your book. Recipes, observations, bits of wisdom you refuse to let the world erase. You add a new line under your grandmother's note. Survival is not silence. It is simply quieter strength. You fall asleep to the sound of firewood cracking, Mopsy purring, and the knowledge that today you were not feared. Tomorrow you might even be trusted. It begins with a knock. Not the sharp kind, not the rhythmic dread of guards or bailiffs, just a soft, polite tap, like someone asking permission rather than asserting power. You're in the back room of the inn, sorting dried herbs into reused cloth pouches. Mopsy lifts her head but doesn't move. She's learned the difference too. You open the door. A woman stands there, middle-aged, wrapped in a blue shawl that's been mended many times. Her hands are clasped tightly in front of her. knuckles pale. She looks behind her before speaking. They said, "You might help." You step aside. She doesn't remove her shawl, but she does sit. Her eyes scan the room, at the small bundles of dried chamomile, the jar of honey, the neat rows of linen. Her shoulders ease just slightly. "My son," she whispers. "He can't sleep. He thrashes, talks to shadows. I've tried prayer and charms, but..." You nod gently, interrupting the spiral of shame. You ask questions, soft ones. How long has it been? What does he eat before bed? Has he had fevers recently? Where does he sleep? You make a simple mixture, valerian, poppy seed, crushed lavender. You pack it in linen and hand it to her with instructions. She takes it like it's a relic. When she leaves, you don't charge her. That night, someone else comes. A man with an old burn on his forearm that never healed properly. "It flares in the cold," he mutters. "Thought I'd ask." You give him a beeswax balm with crushed marigold and comfrey. The next morning, there's a loaf of bread on your doorstep, still warm. This is how it starts. One by one, they arrive. A cough here, a stomach pain there. Nothing dramatic, nothing that requires an official title. You are not the healer. You're just the woman behind the inn who knows things. And it's enough. One afternoon, you're invited to the market. Just as a helper, of course. To carry baskets. To advise on which herbs are freshest. To spot the rot in an otherwise perfect-looking apple. But being seen with others, laughing, talking, matters. It resets how people see you. You are no longer an outsider creeping along the edges of their world. You are inside it, quietly, gently. You even begin to barter, discreetly. A salve for a spool of thread. A tincture for a new pair of shoes. You still won't take coins. Not yet. That would be a step too loud. Historians still argue how women like you survived after trial, how they re-entered, disappeared, or became legends. But you're not interested in being a legend. You're interested in living. One evening, as you return from the market, the innkeeper pauses beside you. "People say you were from the South," she says. Not a question. A statement laced with curiosity. You nod. She sniffs. "They don't like clever women down there." You smile. "They're working on it." She nods once and goes back to kneading dough. Later that night, you hear music. Not real music, just a few hummed notes drifting from the stable. A boy sits on a stool, carving something into a stick, humming to himself. It's a tune your mother used to sing. You stop in your tracks. When he sees you, he doesn't stop. Just smiles and keeps humming. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimes. You sit by the fire that evening, writing again. Not in your old book, it's almost full, but in a new one. A journal of sorts. The first page says, "For the ones who walked away and found better paths." You think of Agnes, the blue ribbon from the boy, the basket of lavender, the bread on the doorstep. You think of all the women who didn't get this far, and you write their names, as many as you can remember. You will not forget them, because healing isn't always about fever or bone. Sometimes it's about memory, about stitching names into pages so the world cannot pretend they never existed. Outside, Mopsy curls beneath a windowsill. Inside, your future unfolds in soft ink and warm tea. One crisp morning, word spreads through town like the scent of wood smoke. A noble's caravan is passing through, briefly. Their horses need rest, their carts need checking, and the young daughter of the house has fallen ill, feverish, raving. The kind of illness that makes physicians shrug and priests reach for incense. The innkeeper tells you over bread and boiled turnips. "They'll be asking for help," she says, "from someone who knows more than prayer." You say nothing. Just tear your bread in half and set some aside for Mopsy. By noon, they arrive. The caravan is all polished brass and dusty wheels, guards in half-polished armor, a physician with a feather in his cap and a look of practiced uselessness. And the girl, pale, wrapped in fine cloth, cheeks flushed the wrong way. They settle near the chapel, which seems to offend the priest more than anyone. "Too close to holy ground," he mutters, though no one listens. You watch from a distance. You don't offer. Not yet. That evening, a woman approaches you. Older, tired, dressed too finely to be from around here. She smells like lavender and expensive worry. "She's my niece," she says, voice tight. They say, "You've helped others." You nod, slowly. "What symptoms?" She tells you. High fever, chills, eyes darting in sleep, no appetite, dreams she can't describe. "It started 3 days ago," she adds. "We've tried everything." You ask about what she's eaten, whether others have been sick, if there's been bad water, spoiled fruit. "No," she insists. "She was fine until we crossed the river." You pause. You've seen this before. You gather what you need, some dried elderflower, a touch of willow bark, and a tincture of feverfew. You ask for no payment. That night, you visit the girl. She lies in the back of the cart, skin glowing with sweat, murmuring things that make no sense. Her hands twitch as if grasping something just out of reach. You kneel beside her. You don't chant. You don't wave your hands. You don't speak Latin. You simply place a cloth soaked in vinegar and mint oil on her forehead and whisper, "You're safe now. Just rest." You stay for 2 hours. When you leave, the guards nod at you. Not politely, respectfully. The next morning she wakes, hungry. The physician pretends it was his tonic. The priest says it was divine intervention. The aunt, however, finds you behind the inn. She places a silver coin in your hand, heavier than any you've ever held, and a ring. "Just in case you ever need someone to vouch for you." You nod. "Say thank you." She says, "You saved her." You reply, "She saved herself. I just helped her remember how." The caravan leaves that afternoon, trailing banners and gratitude. You watch them go, ring in your pocket, cat on your shoulder. That evening the inn is lively. People talk, not just in whispers, in words, real words. "She helped the noble's daughter," someone says. "She knew what the physician didn't. She's no witch." That last one makes you pause. Not because it's wrong, but because it's unnecessary. You're past needing labels now. Historians still debate how people who were once accused reclaimed their place. You suspect they never did, not entirely. But here in this small town with its lopsided roofs and stubborn goats, you've carved a space. A woman sits beside you by the fire. "Do you think you could help with my knees?" she asks, not as a whisper, but a question. Director, you nod. "Let's try." Later, you write again. "Healing is not about being needed. It's about being allowed." Mopsy curls beside your new journal and sighs. You scratch behind her ears. She purrs like thunder far away. The seasons begin to shift. Autumn bleeds into the village like ink into linen. Slowly, then all at once. The leaves rust, the air crisps, and the smell of smoke settles into everyone's clothes like a second skin. It's harvest time, and the town comes alive with the urgency of gathering before winter presses in. You help where you can, binding herbs, steeping roots, applying poultices to tired shoulders and scraped hands. You make a tea that steadies the nerves, and a salve for chilblains. The innkeeper swears by it now, even though she'll never admit she was skeptical once. But there's still a weight in the air, a kind of collective holding of breath. Because word travels, even through forests and over rivers. And sometimes the past loops back. One morning a rider arrives, cloaked in gray, bearing a scroll sealed with wax that cracks like brittle bones when opened. You read it 3 times to be sure. A new inquisitor has taken Willem's post. He's reopening records, reviewing judgments, banishments especially. Yours is on his list. The scroll ends with a gentle threat. Return for reassessment or face further consequence. Your hands shake. Not with fear, with fury. Because even now, after everything, after the girl you healed and the town you've helped, someone still wants to drag your name back through the mud. You sit by the fire, staring into the flames as if they might offer clarity. Mopsy hops into your lap, tail flicking like a punctuation mark. You consider running, again. You also consider staying, because this time, things are different. This time, you're not alone. When the innkeeper hears, she doesn't blink. "We'll say you're gone," she says, "that you left last month." The baker nods. No one's seen her in weeks. Even the priest, who still furrows his brow at your remedies, mutters, "There are worse things than women who heal." And just like that, the town closes ranks. Historians still argue whether villages ever truly protected the women they once feared. Maybe they didn't. Maybe this one is different. Maybe you were lucky. Or maybe trust grows like time, slowly but deeply rooted once it takes. You retreat to the edge of town, a small cottage offered by an old widow who says it feels less haunted with someone else in it. You don't hide. Not exactly. You just quiet yourself. Let the world forget your name while the people remember your kindness. You keep tending, keep healing. The townsfolk come at dusk now, lanterns in hand, speaking in low voices. Not afraid of you, just afraid for you. And so, in the shadow of renewed persecution, you build something stronger than fear. Community. Each night, you light a candle for the women who never got this far, for those whose names were lost, whose stories were cut short. You write their memory into your second book. They were wise, and they were silenced. We will be both, and we will survive. Mopsy sleeps at the window. She's grown rounder, more complacent. The village children bring her scraps now, calling her the herb cat. You wear the ring the noblewoman gave you, not because it's gold, but because it reminds you, you are not small. The leaves fall faster now. The air smells of frost. You begin preparing your winter stocks. Dried rosehip, salted roots, bundles of sage. And one day, a traveler comes through with a letter. Willem is dead. Typhoid, they say. No irony lost. His replacement? Less inclined to review dusty verdicts. Too many real problems, the traveler says. You smile, remembering that phrase. That night, you sit by your fire, hands folded over your lap, Mopsy curled beside you, the world outside shivering into winter. You survived accusation, banishment, trial, and here you are, still healing, still writing, still you. Winter sets in like a slow, heavy quilt, the kind that doesn't ask if you're ready, just settles on your shoulders and dares you to shrug it off. The village huddles close in the cold. People move slower, speak softer, gather in kitchens thick with steam and story. And you? You become part of the rhythm, woven into the quiet pattern of survival. You start each morning by stoking the fire, its glow painting the stone walls golden. Mopsy patrols the windowsill, tail flicking at imaginary threats. She doesn't like snow, but she enjoys watching it, like a queen watching her people struggle. Your home is modest, a small table, a shelf of jars labeled in your tidy hand, a window that fogs with every breath. But it's enough. It's yours. No torches outside, no knocking at odd hours. Just peace, hard-won, uneven, but real. You still heal. Old Thomas, the shepherd with one working leg, comes every other week for willow bark tea. The baker's daughter brings you her dreams, hoping you'll make sense of them. You never pretend to know, but you listen, and sometimes that's the medicine. And more than once, a knock comes late at night. A woman with a black eye and no words, a boy coughing blood who's not supposed to be out, a midwife with trembling hands. You don't ask questions. You boil water. You grind roots. You open your door, not because it's safe, but because it's right. One night you sit by the fire with your book, quill in hand. You write slowly, deliberately. The candle burns low, casting long shadows. Let the ones who call us witches see that we are the ones who stay when others run, that we soothe what the world wounds, that we walk without banners, but leave healing in our footprints. Mopsy snores quietly at your feet. Outside, snow falls thick and silent, covering everything like a secret. You think of the path behind you, the girl on trial, the woman with no home, the healer with no name. and how each version of you still lives in this cottage. You survived, and not just by hiding, not just by running, but by being. Being kind when the world was cruel, being wise when the world wanted ignorance, being soft in places hardened by fear. Historians may never write your name. They may never mark your cottage on a map or wonder what tinctures you made or how you knew when a cough was just a cough and when it was something more. But here, in this quiet corner of the world, the truth breathes. Not in books or scrolls, in people, the ones you helped. The ones who speak your name not in warning, but in gratitude. A witch, number A woman, a healer, a whisper in the snow. Now let's settle the fire down a little. You're safe now, here with the snow falling outside, quiet as sleep. The fire's soft, warm light dances gently across the floorboards, and the only sounds are Mopsy's slow breaths and the whisper of wind slipping past the shutters. The world, for all its fear and noise and sharpness, fades for a moment. And in its place, only this, warmth, memory, the feeling of something small but true being protected, tended to like a flame that can't go out. You're not walking through dark forests anymore. No needles, no rivers, no accusations. Only a hearth, a story, and the hush of people who remember you, not for how you were judged, but for how you stayed. So breathe. Feel the weight of the blankets, the rhythm of your heart slowing, the thoughts quieting, curling inward like leaves in snow. You're not alone. You were never truly alone. Somewhere, even now, someone is lighting a candle because of something you said, or something you healed, or something you simply endured. Let the night hold you. Let the story soften. Let yourself sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.